the guy in the video, you can see that there's a guy that kind of came back around my car from the back end of my car. And the weird thing is that he was approaching me, but he didn't say anything. And he kept on getting closer and closer, and he didn't say anything.
Hey gang, I guarantee if you're watching the main channel, you're seeing these videos of people in self-defense encounters all the time. People start bleeding, they start bleeding fast. And we as self-defenders should be interested in all the tools that can protect and preserve innocent life. And good trauma gear can do that. It's just as important as a firearm, maybe more so. Listen, trauma is trauma. Whether it's a vehicle accident, a farming accident, or a gunshot wound, when seconds count, you need the right equipment for the job. You must get your trauma gear from a reputable source, and Mountain Man Medical is ASP's go-to source for all of our medical gear. Go to mountainmanmedical.com and let them know you heard about them on the ASP podcast. Hey gang, just some quick housekeeping. Today's guest, his video was featured back on July 15th. There was a bit of a mess up with the scheduling. That was my fault, not John's. So, today's guest, video on the main channel on the 15th, back on 15th of July. And last week's guest, his video will be out sometime in the next week or so. So look for that on the main channel. My apology for the mix-up. But anyway, here we go. Enjoy this episode. Alrighty, gang. Welcome back to the Active Self-Protection Podcast. I am your host, Mike Williver. I am your favorite former Fed. With us today, a young man by the name of Eric. Last name will be redacted, along with any of their information, because, well, he wants to keep his anonymity. So Eric's Eric's incident was caught on surveillance camera, and I think we're going to have John breaking that down on the main channel the same day this comes out. So give that a look on the main Active Self-Protection channel. Eric, I want to thank you so much for being here.
Okay, well, thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it. I think it's a very, very interesting opportunity, and thanks for having me on board today.
Oh, my pleasure. So his incident, which we'll get to in just a moment, happened a few years back. He was in a parking lot and was attacked by two people, and was able to successfully, more or less, defend himself from any serious injuries. So it's a happy-ish ending. No one wants to be assaulted or robbed, but he came out of it in one piece. So that is the lesson we're trying to help people learn today. So tell us, Eric, prior to this event, were you at all a firearms person, self-defense oriented person? Was that something you thought about with any regularity?
Well, here's the funny part. That's actually a really interesting question. So usually I don't carry anything on me. Okay. I don't carry anything at all. I just carry my wallet, my keys, almost kind of like a minimalistic approach to, the stuff that I carry. And the funny thing is that the only reason why I'm actually carrying pepper spray on me is because of your show. So your Active Self-Protection show on YouTube, if I hadn't have come across that show, I would have not have had pepper spray in my pocket. So the only reason I have pepper spray is because of your show. And then here I am, and it's literally getting me out of a really tough situation. And it's like, I can't even believe it. You know what I mean? So it's like, it feels like a very smart move. You know what I mean? That I had that on me.
Yeah, for sure. This is the kind of stuff we love to hear. And, not tooting our horn, but we hear it a lot. We get a lot of comments from people saying, hey, you know what, you helped me out. Help me be aware of my surroundings, or, you guys inspired us to get a firearms carry permit or to carry pepper spray. So that's great. That's why we do what we do. So what you said, you got OC spray because of watching the channel. Did you get any? Most people don't. You didn't get any training, right? You just went out and bought some pepper spray to carry?
Well, okay. So I think I bought it off of Sabre. It was the Sabre pepper spray, and they have all different types. So I got like the liquid one. Okay. It was like the pure liquid one. And it did come with like a little test canister with water in it. And I remember when I bought it, when I first got it in, like I brought it over to my friend's house, and I let him and me, we both tested out like the water spray one. It has nothing in it but water. Mm-hmm. So I tested that out. But I had never actually tested out the actual pepper spray until that exact day. So the canister was unused until that day.
Yeah, I used to teach OC and a bunch of other stuff, but OC spray training to my fellow agents back in the day. And I recommend anyone, when you purchase a new pepper spray, and of course we recommend Palm. It is a sponsor, Peace of Mind, OC spray. Check them out. I recommend that you find a really out of the way place, open field or somewhere where there's no one around, and just keep it pointed in the safe direction and give it just a quick test spray to make sure it works. I know most people probably don't do that, and it's very rare that any kind of pepper spray malfunctions, but you would hate to be in the middle of an altercation when you find out it doesn't work. You know what I mean? But all's well that ends well. So where were you when this incident went down? Looks like it was a pretty dark parking lot based on the video.
So the actual location is just a local grocery store. And this is a grocery store. And the funny part about this, and when I say funny, I just mean interesting, but the funny part about this is that this is a local grocery store. I've been here a million times, and it's one of those things where it's not like it's in a bad neighborhood. Okay. I mean, the neighborhood is not a bad neighborhood. However, there's kind of like this one ghetto apartment complex that's right next to the grocery store. And that kind of makes the place a little weird at night. Mm. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And the other thing that I wanted to mention, because in the video, you only get so much information, right, from the video. There's usually much more information that's actually there than what you see. But the thing is that I've been here at this grocery store many times, and there's been many people that have approached me that are weird people. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Asking for rides, asking for money, asking for cigarettes. So it's like when this kind of happened, it didn't really seem abnormal until I was actually getting attacked. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like I'm used to kind of weird people at night, in this location. And that almost kind of makes it a little bit more scarier, because it's like you get used to weird people. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I was going to say where I grew up in DC, and there was a pretty bad, probably still is a pretty bad homeless problem. And you do become inured to the fact that there's people yelling to no one in particular, or, rambling to themselves, or making threatening gestures, because it's just so common. You don't expect them to actually assault you. But in your case, that's exactly what happened. So just walk us through the event. You were coming out of the store, and it looks like you could see at least one of these guys before you got to your car. So walk us through that.
Okay, so I pulled up to the grocery store just like normal, and I already noticed something. So before the attack even happened, I already noticed something when I walked into the store, and it was two guys, okay, sitting on the curb right there in front of the store. And the impression that they made on me was, hey, there's two guys. They look like they have nothing to do. They look like maybe they're waiting for a ride or something, but also the time that this happened this is 12 o'clock at night. So this particular grocery store stays open a little bit later. And I do understand that it kind of is a little late to go to a grocery store at 12 o'clock at night, but they're open. I go to the store, there it is. But the main thing is that before this attack even happened, my radar was already picking up on these guys, because it's just two guys at 12 o'clock at night sitting on a curb, and it looks like they have absolutely no plans on doing anything other than they're waiting for a ride. And the funny thing is I didn't know what ride they were waiting for, but they were waiting for my ride. You know what I mean? Like, right. I knew they were waiting for a ride. I just didn't know it was my ride.
Sure. So we talk a lot about red flags. I mean, I don't know if that wasn't a bright red flag. It wasn't like there's fireworks going off that you're going to be in immediate danger, but you definitely took notice of them, and it seemed odd to you that they were where they were doing what they were doing at late hour.
Exactly.
Okay.
So it did seem a little weird that there's two guys just hanging out at a store, and it's midnight, and they're just hanging out at a store. You know what I mean? And it looks like they have nothing to do. So in the video, you actually get information that I didn't know when I was in the store. And the information was, it looks like they're kind of wandering around the parking lot, kind of scoping out people. So I didn't see that. Okay. And then when I was coming out of the store, I was probably in there maybe 10, 15 minutes. So when I was coming out of the store, I kind of noticed one of the guys was coming up to my car. And this is where, like I said, I have had many people approach me in this parking lot asking me for change, asking me for money. So when somebody was kind of coming up to me, I'm like, oh, well, what is he going to ask for? But what I didn't see is that there was a guy behind me who was basically lining up ready to basically run into me and try to knock me down. So it's almost kind of like, and this is a situation where it's 2 against 1. Okay. And, I saw the guy in front of me, and it was kind of really weird because the guy in the video, you can see that there's a guy that kind of came back around my car from the back end of my car. And the weird thing is that he was approaching me, but he didn't say anything. And he kept on getting closer and closer, and he didn't say anything. And so usually when people approach you, they say something to you if they're asking for, money or something.
Sure.
But in this case, he just kept on getting closer and closer, and there was no words exchanged at all. So I kind of knew something was weird. And then it was like, I felt like someone was jumping on my back. And that was the other guy that I never saw that was behind me, that was trying to basically run up against me and push me and knock everything out of my hands. So I ended up dropping all of my stuff, right? So I dropped my keys on the ground. I dropped all of my groceries. And so what they were trying to do, if I, could guess, is they were trying to get a hold of my keys. So, and they were probably trying to knock me down on the ground, if I had to guess. So the funny thing is that I didn't go down. And, a lot of people have said, well, why didn't you fall down when the guy pushed you? And it's because I'm a skateboarder. I have excellent balance. You know what I mean? So somebody else that may not be, athletic or whatever, they might have, been pushed down on the ground. But being an athletic person, and especially a skateboarder, it's like my balance is very, very good. So it's like, even though I was blindsided and pushed from the back and I didn't even see it coming, I didn't even fall down. So that in itself is already a plus in the situation.
Yeah. Plus I mean, you didn't see it coming. I assume you didn't hear any footsteps behind you. You were probably focused on the guy in front of you. But the fact that you managed to stay on your feet despite a sneak attack from there is impressive. So once he jumps on you and you shed him off, are they saying anything to you? Are they saying, give me the keys? Are they saying, give us your wallet? Or what's being said, if anything?
Okay. So that's the thing. That's what makes this actually kind of a scary event. And during the whole event, the whole confrontation, not a single word from them, not one word. It was just, they wanted my car. Maybe they probably, and again, if they had more leverage in the situation, they probably would have wanted my wallet, my phone. Usually they take whatever they can, but they definitely were after my car. And the reason why they were sitting on the curb in front of the store was because they were scoping out which car are we going to take. And another thing is that my car, the paint job is completely black. Okay. So it was a black car. And they might have actually thought, hey, maybe we should take this guy's car because it's night. He has a black car. We just vanish, into the dark. You know what I mean? So it may have also been the color of my car, which they might have, and they saw that I was a single person. You know what I mean? Single person, dark car. Hey, we can take this guy.
I think you might be giving them more credit than they're due for intelligence and planning and forethought, but maybe that's absolutely a possibility.
That's my theory. Maybe I'm right. Maybe I'm not, speculation.
So, the first guy, you end up pushing him off, and there was a kind of an extended roundabout with you guys that went on. So walk us through that. Once you got the guy off of your back, what happens next?
Okay, so the guy, the one guy in front of me is the distraction. It's kind of like it's a two person on one, tactic where one guy approaches you from the front, one guy approaches you from the back. It's hard to win in that situation. But the guy from the back, he pushes me, and I didn't really. All I did was recover from the push. Okay, I didn't really, get. He didn't technically jump on my back. He just pushed me.
Right.
Okay. So I didn't really have to shake him off or anything. It was just recovering from the push. But basically right after that, I knew that I was under attack. And it was kind of like, it's one thing for someone to approach you. It's another thing to know that you're being attacked. And at that moment, it's like the whole situation felt very different because I knew that I was like in danger. Basically what happened is I basically backed up from the situation I took a couple steps back or whatever. I reached into my pocket. I grabbed that pepper spray out. I flipped the switch from off to on, and then I basically ran forward to the guy, to whoever I could that was closest to me. And I think it was, I can't remember which guy it was, but one of the guys, I basically started chasing him with the pepper spray. And I can tell you right now that the time period of from being pushed to getting out that pepper spray, it was like I couldn't get it out fast enough. You know what I mean? It was like just reaching in my pocket, flipping the switch, holding it in my hand. It felt like an eternity. You know what I mean? And really, it was only like 2 seconds, but it was like I felt every moment of those 2 seconds.
We talk
once I, yeah.
Oh, God, yeah. Sorry. We talk about this on the show quite a bit. The sensation that time is slowing down in a critical incident is it's not universal, but it's fairly common. It's the body's way of giving you time to think, for lack of a better way of explaining it. But I do know the feeling of being in the middle of a situation. I want to backtrack for just a moment and comment on something you said earlier. You realized you were under attack. We cannot stress enough how important it is, as Stephanie Widener, our CEO, likes to say in her classes, once this thing starts to go down, you need to rapidly and radically accept reality. This is happening. The longer it takes you to come to that conclusion, the longer it takes you to mount any kind of a defense for yourself. So if you're a high school student sitting in your class and you hear loud bangs in the hallway, no, it's not fireworks. It's never going to be no one's bringing fireworks to school and setting them off. That's a shooter. You need to react immediately. You need to get comfortable with the fact that this is where we're at. This is a reality. I need to deal with it now. So I love the fact that it didn't take you that long. And then, moving forward into that, how long is this going to take to get the pepper spray out of my pocket? Is a real thing. So you get it out. Were you able to actually make contact with either one of these knuckleheads with the spray?
So when it happened, when the event happened, some of it is actually a blur in my actually memory because it was just so quick and so fast. But looking at the actual footage, it looks like one of the guys, I was actually able to get him with the pepper spray. So basically one of the guys that I'm chasing after with the pepper spray, he kind of like hides behind my car and ducks down. Okay. As if I'm not going to see him. You know what I mean? Right. Which is funny. So at that point, I'm trying to spray him the whole time. But at that point in the video, you can definitely tell that I got him, in the face area, because he kind of like, shakes his face off and kind of makes a fist and kind of, shakes back and forth like, oh, that really stung. You know what I mean? Right. Like you could definitely tell that I got him. And one thing that I want to say is that, I've watched videos on the internet about people doing pepper spray demonstrations. And I can tell you right now that a lot of those demonstrations, those are under ideal circumstances where somebody's just standing still and then somebody pepper sprays you. But in this situation, I'm literally running after a moving target, spraying this pepper spray. And I can tell you right now, I definitely got some blowback of the pepper spray on myself. Like I remember having a couple little dots on my face that were just stinging really bad. But the majority of it did not get on me. And I definitely think that I got one of the guys with it for sure.
This is why I recommend that if you're going to carry pepper spray, mainly for law enforcement, if you're going to carry pepper spray, it's even if your agency issues pepper spray, it's important to get exposed to it, get a full exposure. That way you can, later on, you will know what happens when you're exposed to OC spray. You don't want to find out in the field when you get blowback, and you will get it eventually, or you'll get, your partner will accidentally hit you in the face instead of the bad guy or whatever. It's important to know how you respond to it. I know, because as an instructor, I was exposed 9 separate times to a full face full of pepper spray, and it sucked every single time that it happened. But I could articulate beyond a shadow of a doubt that when I am exposed directly to OC spray, my eyes shut completely, snot ropes, can't see, can't think clearly, very, very unpleasant. That way, if God forbid I got into a situation where somebody was threatening me with pepper spray, I could explain why I reacted the way I did, because I knew if I was exposed to it, especially by myself, things could go I would be, as defenseless as I could ever be because I wouldn't be able to see anything, having to hold my eye open with my fingers to get it open enough to see what's going on around me. Anyway, so you got some blowback, but it wasn't right in your eye, so you were able to fight through that. Not the end of the world. Yeah, there's no way for you. You're not going to have time to wet your finger, stick it in the air, see which way the wind is blowing, and then get that ideal shot.
Yeah.
So you spray this guy. He's obviously feeling the effects. Now, at some point, they did get your car. So talk to us about how that happened.
Okay, so the interesting thing is that when I was being attacked, I was not aware that I had dropped my keys on the ground. Okay. So, and again, there's two guys against me. So while I'm chasing this one guy with the pepper spray, the other guy is basically making quick work of scooping up the keys off the ground. Okay. So I pepper spray one of the guys. The other guy picks up the keys on the ground. Then I run away because I thought it was just an attack on me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So at that point, I started just making a run for the actual store to go try to get some help or something. And so at this point, when I was running away, that's when they actually kind of recouped themselves. And then they came back to get the car. So, and you can see in the video that they are hitting there's a remote key on the car where you can unlock the car. Mm-hmm. From the remote. You can see that the lights are constantly going off because they are hitting the unlock button on the car. So they run towards the car, they get into the car, and that gives me a little bit of time because, they don't know how to use the car. They didn't even know if it was a manual or a stick shift, Right. It would have been really funny if it would have been something that they didn't know how to drive.
Yeah, the millennial anti-theft device.
Yeah. So once I saw that they were stealing my car, that also kind of changed my whole perception of the situation, because at first I thought, well, they're just attacking me. And I actually still thought I had my keys on me. So once I saw that they're stealing my car, I was like, is there anything I can do? And I don't know if this is a smart idea or not, but I actually ran up back to the car and I grabbed the passenger door handle and I opened it. Okay. And, the door probably opened about halfway, so it wasn't completely locked. They did not lock the door, but the guy quickly grabbed it and shut it. And I guess he held on to the door so that I couldn't open it anymore. Mm-hmm. And at that point, they just drove away. And then that was it. It was over at that point.
Yeah, to answer your question, I wouldn't advise, easy for me to say I wasn't in your position, right? But I would advise against, if the person's already in your car, the possibility of any being struck by the car is, was pretty high. So if someone's in your car, they got the engine started, I wouldn't recommend trying to get them out of it. It sucks, that's your car. You worked hard for it. So just to watch it drive away isn't easy, but just my 2 cents on that. So you at some point call the police, or did someone call the police for you?
Yeah. So at that point, once they drove off, I basically went back into the store and then reported that, my car had been stolen. And then I believe I called the police using my cell phone, and, there's a police station like five minutes away. Mm-hmm. And sure enough, they showed up in a matter of minutes. But like one of my friends told me, he said, the cops, they show up in minutes, but you need them in seconds.
Yep. Yeah.
So when you actually sit down and evaluate the whole, event that happened, it literally is in a matter of seconds. And at that point, it's very hard sometimes to call upon help when it's only like 30 seconds or less, because it's quick, it's done. And once it's done, it's over. And the one thing that I was kind of surprised is it's like usually in a parking lot, usually somebody's in there. Usually you're not completely alone in a grocery store parking lot. Usually there's one or two cars where they're idling or somebody's waiting for somebody. And what was just really interesting is during this whole time period, it was like nobody was in the parking lot. And it really felt like there was no good Samaritan, there was nobody. It literally felt like I was all alone. And that was also another feeling that I got. It felt like, there's 8 billion people in the world, but in this situation, it was just 3 people, and it was me against them and nobody else. And that's how alone it felt.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, I was robbed when I was in high school. I managed a movie theater in Maryland, and we got robbed, and I had a gun pointed in my face. And even though there was other people in the room, I still felt very alone in that moment. So I do understand what you mean by that. So the police show up, or are they able to find these two guys, find your car, or no?
Okay, so there is a total aftermath story. So when I first reported this, we went to I called the cops. We went to the police station, and one of the cops told me, he said a very popular crime is that people will carjack you, right? But they won't keep the car. They'll carjack you. They'll get in your car. They'll drive it around the block or a couple blocks down. They'll take all of the valuables out of the car and they'll ditch the car.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, one officer told me that that's a very popular tactic. So me and one of my family members, that picked me up, we drove around to try to see if they ditched the car, to try to see if they just took, whatever is valuable in the car and ditched it. And we drove around for several hours and we didn't find anything. And it turns out I got, a letter in the mail like 6 months later that there was a highway patrol officer that pulled them over in the car. And they were actually using this car as their daily driver.
Wow.
So, yeah. So I think that's kind of a rare situation because here's an event where I'm getting my car stolen and their intent was to use it as a daily driver. Like usually they don't do that. Usually they part it out, right? Or they sell it, or they, take everything that they can and abandon it. They don't usually, not that I'm aware of, use it as their normal commuter.
That's very odd. I actually don't think I've ever heard of that before. When I worked in San Diego, the National City, which is just south of San Diego and just north of Tijuana, Mexico, was the car theft capital of the world, because they would just drive it down to Mexico and that's it. We're done. There's nothing can be done at that point. So when this trooper pulled him over, was he able to determine it was a stolen car and arrest him, or what happened?
Yeah. So I got this letter in the mail. It said, your car, it had a little report. It said, your car was pulled over. There was if the car was reported as stolen and they made an arrest. And so I don't know if both guys got arrested, but it looked like maybe it was just one arrest. It looked like only one person was driving the car. But basically, they were using their car as a daily driver, and it took about 6 months for someone to pull them over for whatever reason. I don't know. Mm-hmm. It might have been an expired sticker because I think my sticker was just about to expire. So they actually took the car to an impound lot with a bunch of other cars. Mm-hmm. And I actually requested that I was able to go and, maybe recover any belongings that were in the car. So I eventually drove to this impound lot after they towed the car, and the car had different rims on it, hubcaps.
Of course it did. Of course it
because did. They're trying. So they took off the stock hubcaps and they put on their own custom hubcaps that kind of disguise the car. Mm. So the car also smelled totally like weed. Okay.
Yeah. Predictable.
Yeah. I opened up the car door. I'm like, okay, this smells like weed. And also the car had been damaged a little bit. Like the front windshield had some cracks in it, that weren't there. And, the interior had been a little, roughed up, but there was also a bunch of baby seats and stuff in the trunk and in the back seat. So it's this looks like it was, maybe somebody had a family, or maybe the guys had a baby or something. Who knows? But but I was able to recover my my math textbook that was in the trunk that they were totally not interested in. Yeah. I was able to recover that one.
You just have to hope that he didn't smoke weed in the car until after he dropped the baby off at the nursery. I mean, that's, you hope springs eternal.
Of course.
Had you been able to get another car in the interim?
So one of the challenges, this was a challenge, okay, is that in my area, we had been hit by a really bad hurricane. Okay. So it flooded tons. It basically flooded a bunch of cars. So basically the used car market was very it was very hard to get a car during this time period. Um, and so what I ended up doing is, this is a story within itself, but one of my family members had an old car in their driveway that was kind of like, it kind of broke down.
Mm-hmm.
And I decided to fix that car up. And I actually got it working. And I drove that around for a little bit until I was able to find a proper replacement. And eventually I found an actual real car. And so I was able to get back on my feet, but it took a really long time to do that. And I could have, used like a rental car or something like that, but I knew that it was going to be hard to find a car. So after the 30 days was up, it was like, I no longer use the rental car anymore. You know what I mean? It was like, I'm going to fix up this old car. It's a project car. I'm going to get that going. And eventually I got back on my feet, but it definitely derailed me for a little bit.
Yeah, I'm sure. So talk to us about the lessons that you learned, if any, if you can go back and start over from when you're walking in that store. What might you have done differently, and what would you recommend someone else do in that situation?
Well, the one thing that, of course, once something happens, you can always go back and say, I would have done something different.
Right.
But the one thing that I probably would have done is maybe paid closer attention to the first red flag. And that is, there's two guys sitting on the curb, and it looks suspicious, and I'm getting a bad vibe about these guys. Because I will say this, when I was actually being attacked, my first response was, I was like, are you guys serious? I was like, I kind of already saw this. Like, I already knew you guys were suspicious. I just didn't know you guys were actually going to do it.
Yeah, having your suspicions confirmed isn't always a happy time. Sometimes it's terrible when your suspicions are confirmed.
Yeah. So the feeling was like, it was like, really? Like, you guys are really going to go there? Like, I kind of saw it, but I didn't know if you were really going to go through with it. But you guys are going to go through with it. Oh, okay. So the other thing is this, so I skateboard, right? So sometimes when I go to a store, I will actually just get on my skateboard. Like, I'll take my skateboard out of my trunk and I'll actually skateboard up to the grocery store. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, from the parking space to the grocery store. If you are on a skateboard, okay, and you're, traveling at a high speed or whatever, and you actually have a skateboard on you, I think it's less likely that somebody's going to mess with you, because you already have basically something to hit somebody with. Mm. So that's always something that, like, a tip for people to do is, if you have a skateboard, just use it as, like a little, it's kind of like having like a little, travel device or whatever. But if you're on a skateboard, all you have to do is pick up the skateboard and hit somebody with it. So I think that if I had been on my skateboard, that might have deterred the whole situation.
And, we talk about John's rules of stupid. I'm not calling you stupid. Don't mind me, but don't be at stupid places at stupid times doing stupid stuff. And it's just, I'm not going to ask you what you were going to the store for. I'm sure it was a very important item. I'm sure it wasn't like Dove bars.
It was popsicles. Okay.
Was it really? Was it really?
Actually, yeah.
Oh, no. All right, so the popsicles. Did you recover the popsicles at least? Tell me they didn't take the popsicles.
No. The popsicles melted on the ground. Okay?
That's a shame. That's probably the saddest part of this whole story. So
one other thing I want to say is this. So I can give you the ounce number of the pepper spray can that I had. I don't have it off the top of my head, but it was one of the small ones. Mm-hmm. Okay, it's the pocket size small one. But I will say this is that after the whole event happened, I ended up spraying the rest of the pepper spray out. Like a couple days later after this happened, I sprayed out the rest of the pepper spray in my backyard just to see how much I had left. Mm-hmm. And I only had basically one good spray left of this pepper spray. So, in hindsight, it's kind of like, I used the pepper spray and I got him a little bit, but it's like, I didn't have much more. Mm-hmm. So if this fight had gone on longer, if it had been extended to maybe a couple more minutes or something like that, I might have been in a whole nother situation, because you only have a limited can. So what I'm trying to say is it almost wasn't enough. Okay.
Yeah. And I've said this before, if you get someone around the face area, around the eyes with a quick dab, a quick burst of pepper spray, that should be enough. And spraying them again and again and again, if you've gotten them in the face the first time, I wouldn't recommend it, only because the actual pepper in the pepper spray doesn't really start to work until the propellant that sends it between the can and your face begins to evaporate. It's not long, it's a second or two, but if you spray too long, more isn't better, I guess is what I'm getting at here. And I'm not sure, I mean, unless you're going to carry like a police duty belt, I'm not sure how big your can could be reasonably carried on you. But, the one I carry, they can't see this, but it's a palm, just a little pocket size with a clip. And, I recommend pepper spray to absolutely everybody, as you can attest. It's good to have a concealed firearm. It's good to have a med kit or whatever else on you, but the pepper spray will solve a lot more problems than almost anything else, without you having to go through the trauma of shooting somebody. So I think you comported yourself pretty well. Folks, don't forget to check out the video over on the main channel. I know last week we had a delay. The video didn't come out until a couple of days later, but there it is. We do get it done. And Eric, I want to thank you so much for being here. I really enjoyed hearing your story, and you got my email. Is there anything I can do for you in the future? Please let me know.
Okay, have a good one.
Alrighty, folks, welcome back to the Gutowski Files, starring our intrepid reporter, Stephen Gutowski, who is the founder of TheReload.com and host of the Weekly Reload podcast. And we are both very much enjoying your reviews of our little segment here with the word Gutowski to let us know you made it all the way to the end of the show. And that helps us with our advertising, so keep it up. Stephen, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good, man. It's been a rough few weeks on the Gutowski Files, just kind of not really a lot of good news. So we have some news that's, a bad outcome because people were hurt and killed, but in another way, a good outcome because a young man was able to intervene in what appears to be an active shooting situation in Greenwood, Indiana at a mall. And so this is, if everything shakes out the way it looks like it's going to, this is going to be a case of a good guy with a gun, doing the thing that we hope people are able to do when they exercise their Second Amendment rights. So talk to us about what happened.
Yeah, certainly. Well, there was a mall shooting in Indiana on Sunday where an attacker came out of the restroom with a rifle and proceeded to start shooting people in the food court. He unfortunately was able to kill 3 people and injure 2 more before a Good Samaritan bystander who was armed shot back at the attacker, killing him and ending his rampage, his murder spree. That shooter's name is Eli Dicken. He's 22 years old. Interestingly, did not have a concealed carry permit, but that was because he did not need one in Indiana anymore as of this month. Their permitless carry legislation went into effect just this month, and so what he was doing was not illegal. But yes, he's credited by the law enforcement who gave press conferences after the event with saving many lives. Obviously, he was able to respond, having been there when it was happening, significantly sooner than the police were able to get there. And so it's very likely he saved quite a lot of people from being killed. Yeah,
normally, John Correa, our the big dog here at ASP, likes to observe the 72-hour rule following something like this. And he broke his own rule today on social media, so I don't mind talking about it this quickly. And if you go over to TheReload.com and look at this article by Jake Fogelman, you'll see a quote there, which I'll just read really quick. Quote, "We believe at this time investigators are still questioning the individual involved, but it appears that a Good Samaritan that was armed observed the shooting in progress and shot the shooter," unquote. That's Jim Ison, chief of police for Greenwood, Indiana. He said that Sunday night at a press conference. So that's a good sign. I mean, generally speaking, a chief of police is not going to make a statement like that about a non-officer involved shooting that quickly. So I think that's probably a good sign for our potential young hero.
Yeah, there hasn't really been any questioning of the basic facts of what happened as they've been reported. Obviously the first reports came in Sunday night, and now we're here Tuesday night when we're filming this, and all we've gotten are some more details, but no real change in the story, unlike what we saw obviously with the Uvalde shooting, where the story changed quite a lot on that front fairly quickly. This has remained consistent, and we know the names of everyone involved now, and we have some accounts from from Eli's girlfriend's grandmother. Actually, I guess gave an interview with local.
That sounds like a Ferris Bueller
media
reference, but go ahead.
Yeah, the girlfriend was also helped people escape, but this is how we got sort of a more detailed description beyond what police had said. Now, police gave out a pretty detailed description of what had happened, including the circumstances of the shooter. They gave out that person's name, which obviously we're not going to repeat, but the attacker and how he carried out his attack, and he had 3 different firearms, and they gave out the names of the victims as well. But there hasn't been any change to the basic facts of this story as of yet. I mean, it's always possible, but it doesn't seem likely in this case. As you said, police have been pretty definitive. And there's certainly surveillance video from the mall that backs up a lot of what has been claimed from witnesses at the scene. So I think he's fairly confident that this is not going to be a story that changes dramatically over the coming days. But interestingly, the reaction, as you might imagine, most people are praising Eli for what he did. For it's, as you noted at the top of the segment, it's still a tragic situation. It's still terrible that anyone was killed during this attack. There's still questions about how the shooter was able to obtain guns, what his background was. Were there incidents that should have been caught that weren't?
Sure.
He did have some sort of juvenile incidents that the police noted in their press conference, though they said they weren't disqualifying incidents. So we'll see if there were more, if there were warning signs of, there may be more on that front on learning how he obtained his gun and potentially how he could have been stopped from doing that, or how the attack itself could have been prevented. But there's obviously the upside that this 22-year-old bystander, this Good Samaritan, was able to end the attack. And the only most people have praised that, right? Even the mall, the company Simon, which owns a lot of malls across the country, they came out and praised his actions. The police praised his actions. The NRA and others praised his actions. But you have seen some interesting pushback from the gun control group leadership. You saw Shannon Watts, who's a spokesperson at Moms Demand Action, which is part of Everytown for Gun Safety. Well, she falsely claimed that he had done something illegal by carrying at the mall, which is not true.
And hardly relevant at this point, I think.
Sure. I mean, obviously there's the old saying of you'd rather be judged by 12 than carried by 6.
Yeah.
This sort of old cliche in the gun world. But
chaotic good.
Yeah. Even still, she was so the mall has a no gun policy of some sort. Though it's not clear if that was posted at this mall, but either way, it doesn't have the force of law, those signs in Indiana. It's not an actual crime. It's sort of like violating a no shirt, no shoes policy that you might see at a convenience store.
Right.
Like, yeah, they can ask you to leave, and if you don't leave, you can be arrested for trespassing.
Sure.
But it's a little bit, the sign itself is not, doesn't have the force of law. But so he didn't do anything illegal. That's clear, I think, at this point. And then you also had Chris Brown, who is the president of Brady, come out and describe his actions as, part of a vigilante safety net.
Oh, dear Lord.
And so implying that he, is a vigilante, which is also, I think, not really an accurate description of what happened.
The distinction being vigilantes go out looking for trouble.
Right.
And this guy was just shopping at the mall.
And often, like a vigilante, obviously, is usually breaking the law when they're taking the justice into their own hands, sort of thing. Generally speaking, they're attacking someone they view as having gotten away with crimes or whatever. This is what this kid did. It was not illegal in any sense. He had a legal right to defend himself and others from imminent bodily harm or death, which was very clearly the situation here. So, it's been interesting to watch that sort of reaction from most people, and then the reaction from the gun control advocates to this incident.
Yeah, speaking of the gun control advocates and the law as it now stands, just very recently, as you noted earlier, one has to wonder if Eli had not had a CCW and therefore it would have been illegal for him to carry. Maybe he wouldn't have been carrying that day. Who knows? Yeah. Tough to say, but these sorts of laws liberalizing the ability for people to carry concealed weapons, I think, are generally speaking good. You're always going to have a knucklehead, or two, who you really wish wouldn't carry because they're irresponsible or they don't train or whatever. But I think these laws on the whole are proving to be the right move, and it certainly appears to have been that way in Indiana. Let me just say this before we continue. Eli Dicken, if you're out there listening, or one of his friends, I'd love to have you on the show when all the legal stuff is over. So hit me up, Mike@AfterCellProtection.com. And Stephen, I guess my biggest question is, do you think incidents like this moving forward will have any effect on other states who currently have restrictive CCW laws, or are they just going to keep doing what they're doing? Because most of the ones now that are shall issue or were shall issue and now are throwing up roadblocks, like Hawaii and California, those places I have a feeling aren't going to change their tune anytime soon.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, in terms of like states where it's really difficult to legally carry a gun, I doubt even an event like this is going to actually change many minds there in terms of their political leadership. It probably makes it harder to argue that these laws are, going to cause blood to run in the streets and cause it to be the Wild West. This is sort of a common, warning that you get from the gun control activists anytime that a gun law is loosened, basically anywhere. But certainly, you've heard it a lot with permitless carry and constitutional carry. That it's going to lead to
the Wild
negative
West
outcomes.
Yeah,
and and that it won't have any positive effect. Well, look, I mean, this is one incident. I want to be, so clearly, this is not a super common way for these events to be resolved. Obviously, it does happen. It's not the first time that somebody has stopped a mass shooter with who was a civilian that was legally armed, ended up stopping the attack. It happened 4 times last year, according to the FBI, and it's happened obviously before that. I mean, it's even happened this year a couple of times. We saw there was an incident in West Virginia where a man opened fire with an AR-15 on a crowd in a park, and a woman who was legally carrying shot back with her handgun and killed the attacker before that one you might not even heard as much about because nobody actually got killed besides the shooter, the attacker.
That's not
in
news.
That circumstance. And so it doesn't get as much news. This one falls into a more, unfortunately, a more newsworthy category because people did die. Then there is the old cliche about news coverage, which goes, if it bleeds, it leads. So this one's in that sort of area where it's clear that more people would have been killed if this kid hadn't done something, but also enough people were actually killed that it's national news.
Right.
So in a weird way, that's how that plays out with news coverage, because it's easier to dismiss an event where nobody actually got hurt besides the attacker than it is to dismiss a mall shooting where people died, but ultimately a lot of people were saved by the intervention from an armed civilian like this. So it's falling into an area where you're seeing a lot more news coverage of it. Not that there wasn't any coverage of the West Virginia incident.
I hadn't heard of it till just now, just for what it's worth.
But there you go. You get the idea. Like, you heard about this one before I brought it up, I'm sure. And probably a lot of listeners did as well, because it got a lot more attention. It fell into this area of, that elevates these things to national news attention for a lot of outlets. And so it probably will have some effect on the debate, but I doubt it's going to, make New York lawmakers change their mind because it's just a single incident. But it could have an effect on the next state that where there's a big push for permitless carry.
Possibly.
And I think that's more realistic, like Florida, perhaps, a state like that.
Steve, I'm not a reporter. You're the reporter here. I think that's obvious to the casual observer. But it's almost as if you're trying to say that a lot of the mainstream press, mainstream media, is trying to push an anti-gun bias in their reporting. Is that, Well,
sure, that's part of it, perhaps, but I think it's just more about sensationalism than sort of anti-gun ideology.
Mm-hmm.
This sort of effect that I'm talking about here with, if it bleeds, it leads. Like if somebody dies, that's more interesting, more newsworthy to more people than if nobody does.
Sure.
I mean, it's a sort of crass calculation,
yeah,
obviously.
Cynical.
But it's true in a lot of cases. And so media responds to that, and they flood the zone when there's these shocking that's why you get way more coverage of a mass shooting, a randomized attack on a group of people where the motive is unclear or at least hard to understand for most people. And the result is, a lot of people being randomly killed, right? That's more newsworthy because people find it to be, a less normal activity, a more shocking activity or event than, if somebody dies in a gang shooting, right? Or even if, for instance, the 4th of July shooting, that got lots of media coverage, right? And this is a common criticism you'll hear. But at the same time, just down the street in Chicago, because the 4th of July shooting happened in a suburb of Chicago, more people were actually killed that night in just your more normalized criminal violence.
Yeah.
But it's less shocking because people expect criminal violence to happen, and they don't expect themselves to be part of it or get caught up in it if they don't live in in an area where it's happening. Whereas a randomized mass shooting could happen anywhere, right? Is one of the pieces of the puzzle as to why this gets more attention, and it's confusing. It's hard to explain. It's hard to understand, and so that causes more curiosity as well. Whereas like somebody having a shootout over a drug deal gone wrong, people can understand. It's
wrap their head around it. Yeah,
approve of it. They don't approve of it. They'd love to find ways to stop it. We all still want to prevent those things, but it's easier for the average person to understand, and so it's less interesting as a news story. And that's a crass calculation, certainly, but it's one based in the human nature and how these things work. So West Virginia incident, nobody's hurt except for the bad guy. Not as interesting, perhaps, as a bunch of people get randomly murdered by a crazy person or a person, a terrorist, like in Buffalo or something like that. And so this situation sort of takes the good guy with the gun aspect and combines it with the fact that people were randomly killed in a mall, a place that a lot of people go to the malls. Everyone has been to a mall, so they understand, and that it could happen somewhere like that is, piques everyone's interest. And so it's hit this sort of sweet spot in terms of newsworthiness that sort of some other self-defense shootings don't. Like you don't need this shooting to prove that a good guy could stop a mass shooting. We've seen that before. We've seen it even just recently in West Virginia. But this will get more attention and be referenced much more often because more people have heard about it because of the way that this news coverage works, right? How the news industry chooses what stories get more coverage. And it's not even necessarily that they're doing it that way out of a desire to push a gun control narrative, although, a lot of major media outlet reporters have that bias, tend to be more liberal and more in favor of gun control. And they tend to live in places like New York and DC, where that's just also just a general opinion of most people who live in those places,
right,
even if they haven't thought very hard about the topic or whatever. But you get what I mean? So it's not just this idea that they're trying to pick out, reporters are running around looking for stories to promote that help pass new gun control laws. It's that they know that people will react stronger to reports of a random mass killing event somewhere that's relatable to a person's everyday life, that's, piques their curiosity, that's hard to understand the motives for. And so they'll gravitate towards those stories much more than they would to like your run-of-the-mill crime story.
Makes sense. All right, folks, that we're about out of time for the Gutowski Files for this week. If you are lamenting the lack, and there is a lack, of down-the-middle, sane, sober reporting on the Second Amendment and all things firearms related, please consider going over to thereload.com and getting a membership. Stephen does still rely on just his members at thereload.com